I never told anyone what I found in my father's safety deposit box 3 months after the funeral. Not until I learned our advisor had vanished into a federal program that made him untouchable. My name is Camila Ortega. I am 31 years old and I am a real estate attorney in Phoenix, Arizona. I thought I understood how systems work. I thought contracts meant something. I thought justice was a structure you could navigate with patience and evidence. I was wrong. My father, Diego Ortega, died in March. Heart attack, sudden, unfair. He was 64 years old. He had built a construction company from 1 truck to 40 employees. He had saved $3.7 million for my mother's security, for my brother's education, for the grandchildren he would not meet. He trusted one man with everything. Richard Hale. Financial advisor, 15 years of service, family friend, godfather to my brother. Richard liquidated every account in 72 hours. Then he disappeared. Not into hiding. Into protection. The government took him. They gave him a new name. They sealed his location. They told us he was helping them prosecute someone else. Someone bigger. Our money was gone. Our future was gone. And the man who took it was safe. Before I tell you what I found in that box, leave a comment that says stolen, if you believe the system sometimes protects the wrong people. There is a particular kind of silence in a house after the last funeral guest leaves. It is not grief. It is waiting. Every object holds a breath. Every room expects someone who will not return. I have spent 3 months learning to hear the difference between a home that is simply empty and one that has been betrayed. The sounds are not the same. My mother, Sophia, is 62 years old. She speaks English with an accent she has never lost, though she has lived in Arizona for 40 years. She raised my brother and me while my father built his company. She managed the books in the early years. She understood money. She understood trust. When Richard came to the funeral, she held his hand. She thanked him for his support. She did not know that he had already emptied the accounts. That the condolences were performance. That the hug lasted 3 seconds too long, because he was calculating his escape. I found the safety deposit box key in my father's desk drawer. He had written my name on the envelope. For Camila. When you are ready. I was not ready. I opened it anyway. The box contained documents I did not understand. Not at first. Account statements from institutions I did not recognize. Wire transfer authorizations with signatures that looked like my father's but were not. A letter, handwritten, dated 2 weeks before his death. Richard has been moving funds. I do not know where. I confronted him. He said it was for tax protection. I do not believe him. Camila, if something happens to me, check the accounts. Do not trust him. Do not trust the system. I am afraid. I read this letter in the bank's private room. I read it 3 times. Then I drove to my mother's house and asked her about the money. She said it was safe. She said Richard had called last week to confirm everything was fine. She said he was preparing a summary for tax season. I did not tell her about the letter. I needed to understand first. I needed to know if my father was paranoid or if he was right. I called my brother Antonio. He is 27, finishing his MBA at ASU. I told him to meet me. I told him to bring his laptop. We sat in my apartment and looked up the institutions on the statements. They were shell companies, registered in Delaware, owned by LLCs in Wyoming, tracing to a single address in Nevada, a post office box. I spent April learning to follow money. I used my legal training. I used databases I had access to through my firm. I hired a forensic accountant named Thomas Webb. I told him I suspected fraud but not the scale. He found the answer in 3 days. Richard had liquidated everything. The retirement accounts. The investment portfolio. The company sale proceeds my father had deposited 6 months before his death. $3.7 million moved through 17 transactions in 72 hours. Converted to cryptocurrency. Moved through exchanges in Singapore, in Dubai, in jurisdictions without U.S. extradition. The trail ended in wallets that could not be traced to individuals. Thomas said this was professional. This was planned. This was not a sudden decision. Richard had been preparing for months. Possibly years. The question, Thomas said, is whether your father discovered this and confronted him, or whether Richard moved early because he suspected discovery. I thought about the letter, the confrontation, the fear. My father knew, I said, and Richard killed him, or let him die, or simply moved faster because the timeline collapsed. Thomas was quiet. That is a serious accusation, he said. I know, I said. Prove it. I tried to contact Richard. His office was closed. Not shut down. Closed. Locked. A sign saying, temporarily unavailable for family emergency. His phone disconnected. His email bounced. His home address, which I found through property records, was vacant. Neighbors said he left in March, 2 days after my father's funeral. Quietly, they said. No forwarding address. I hired a private investigator. She found his trail through airport records. Phoenix to Washington, D.C. Then nothing. No rental car. No hotel. No credit card transactions. A man with $3.7 million in cryptocurrency does not need credit cards. But a man in hiding usually makes mistakes. Richard made none. The investigator said this was unusual. This was professional. This suggested assistance. I did not understand what she meant until May. I received a letter from the Department of Justice. Not addressed to me. Addressed to my mother. Informing her that Richard Hale was now a protected witness in an ongoing federal investigation. His location was sealed. His identity was changed. Contact was impossible. The letter expressed regret for any inconvenience. It offered no restitution, no explanation, no admission that the protected witness had stolen $3.7 million from the family he was supposedly grieving with. I called the number on the letter. I spoke to a case manager named Patricia Yoon. She was polite. She was unhelpful. She confirmed Richard was in the program. She confirmed he was providing testimony against a significant criminal enterprise. She could not confirm which enterprise. She could not confirm when the program would end. She could not confirm whether restitution was being pursued. The Witness Protection Program, she said, prioritizes prosecution over recovery. Mr. Hale's cooperation may lead to the dismantling of an organization that has harmed many families. Many families, I said, including mine. He stole our entire future. He left my mother with nothing. He left my brother unable to finish his degree. And you are protecting him. She was silent. Then, I understand your frustration. But the program's integrity depends on absolute security. Even if we wanted to help you recover funds, we could not reveal his location or identity. He is, for all practical purposes, a different person now. I hung up. I understood. The system that was supposed to protect victims was protecting the criminal. Because he had information about bigger criminals. Because our loss was acceptable collateral. Because justice has priorities, and we were not one of them. I did not accept this. I am an attorney. I believe in systems. I believe in appeals. In procedures. In the possibility of correction. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request. I demanded the disclosure of Richard's location for civil litigation purposes. I was denied. National security. Program integrity. Ongoing investigation. I filed a lawsuit against the Department of Justice. I claimed violation of due process. I claimed that protecting a thief from his victims was not a legitimate government function. The case was dismissed. Sovereign immunity. The government cannot be sued for decisions made in witness protection. I contacted my senator. My representative. I received form letters. I received sympathy. I received nothing actionable. I contacted journalists. One was interested. A financial crimes reporter named Jordan Blake. He investigated for 3 weeks. Then he called me. The story is real, he said. But I cannot publish. My editor killed it. Legal says naming Richard Hale could compromise a federal investigation. We would be liable. For telling the truth? I asked. For telling part of the truth, he said. The part the government says is classified. I was learning. The system was not broken. It was working exactly as designed. Protecting itself. Protecting its processes. Protecting the man who stole from us because he was useful. I spent June and July in research. I learned everything about witness protection. The program began in 1971. It has handled 18,000 witnesses. It has a budget of $20 million annually. It is administered by the United States Marshals Service. It is considered highly successful. It is also, I learned, highly secretive. No public list of protected witnesses exists. No accountability for their crimes before protection. No requirement to notify victims. No mechanism for restitution. The program's goal is prosecution. Everything else is secondary. I found cases. A witness who murdered his wife before entering protection. A witness who continued drug trafficking under his new identity. A witness who was protected after embezzling from a charity. In each case, the government argued that the greater good of prosecution outweighed individual justice. In each case, the victims lost. I also found something else. A pattern. Witnesses in protection sometimes reoffend. They sometimes contact former associates. They sometimes make mistakes. The Marshals Service watches for this. They monitor. They track. They do not prevent. They manage risk. I understood. If I could not reach Richard through the system, I had to make the system need to reach him. I had to become a risk worth managing. I developed a strategy, not to find Richard directly, to create pressure that would force the Marshals Service to find him for me, to examine him, to discover whether he had violated program rules. Because a witness who violates rules can be removed from protection, can be exposed, can be sued. I began by documenting everything Richard had taken, not just the money, the trust, the relationship, the godfather role, the 15 years of access to our family, the knowledge of our security questions, our passwords, our patterns. I filed complaints with every regulatory body, the FINRA, the Arizona State Bar. I did not expect action. I expected records. I expected to create a paper trail that would follow Richard into his new identity. I also began to investigate what he knew. What criminal enterprise he was testifying against. This was harder. The government sealed everything. But criminal enterprises have victims. Victims talk. I found them. Through online forums. Through support groups. Through attorneys who had represented them. I built a network of people harmed by the same organization Richard was helping prosecute. We compared notes. We shared information. We became, collectively, a problem the government could not ignore. The organization was a human trafficking network, operating through construction companies, labor brokers, and immigration services, using undocumented workers, controlling them through debt, moving them across states, generating millions in illegal revenue. My father's company had been a victim, not a participant. Richard had discovered this. He had not reported it. He had used the knowledge to negotiate his position. He would testify against the traffickers. In exchange, his own crimes would be protected. The government would sacrifice our family for the chance to prosecute hundreds of others. I understood the calculation. I did not accept it. I contacted the trafficking victims, the ones Richard had known about and ignored. I told them about the deal. I told them that the man who could have helped them years ago was now being rewarded for his silence. They were angry. They organized. They demanded to know why their suffering had been secondary to Richard's convenience. We filed a joint complaint. Victims of trafficking. Victims of fraud. United by the government's choice to protect one criminal over all of us. We received no response. But we created documentation. We created pressure. We created a situation where Richard's continued protection was costing the Marshals Service more than his testimony was worth. August brought a break. Not from the government. From Richard himself. He made contact. Not directly. Through a lawyer. A man named Samuel Ortiz, practicing in Albuquerque, specializing in witness protection law. A field I did not know existed until I needed it. Ortiz sent a letter. Richard wanted to negotiate. He was willing to return some of the money. In exchange, I would drop my pursuit. I would cease my complaints. I would accept that justice had been served by his testimony against the traffickers. I would let him live his new life in peace. I read this letter for an hour. Then I called Ortiz. I recorded the conversation. I asked specific questions. How much money? Which accounts? When? Ortiz was careful. He said Richard could return $800,000. Approximately 20% of what he took. Over 5 years. In installments. Anonymous transfers. No admission of guilt. No exposure of his identity. No civil liability. I laughed. I could not help it. He steals $3.7 million. He destroys my family. He hides in a federal program. And he offers 20% over 5 years if I promise to forget. Ortiz was silent. He believes this is generous, he said. He believes he has earned his protection. I told Ortiz to tell Richard the first would consider his offer. I was lying. I was preparing. I used the contact. Not to negotiate. To trace. Ortiz was in Albuquerque. He communicated with Richard through the Marshals Service. The service communicated through secure channels to Richard's location. The location was not revealed. But channels can be analyzed. Patterns can be identified. I hired a cybersecurity specialist. Not officially. Through my network of trafficking victims, who had their own resources. We examined metadata. We tracked communication timing. We correlated with known Marshals Service procedures. We narrowed Richard's location to 3 possible cities. Portland, Sacramento, Denver. We could not prove which, but we could create pressure in all 3. I contacted journalists in each city. Local reporters, not national. Less legal exposure. More local interest. I told them a story. A financial advisor who stole millions. Who disappeared into witness protection. Who was now living among them, under a false name, with stolen money. I did not name Richard. I did not name the program. I created suspicion without proof. I created questions without answers. The Marshals Service monitors media coverage of protected witnesses. They would see this. They would wonder. They would investigate whether Richard had violated contact rules by reaching out to me. Whether he had exposed himself. Whether he was still worth protecting. September brought the response I wanted. Not from Richard. From the government. A new letter. Different case manager. Different tone. Concerns have been raised regarding your conduct. Harassment of a protected witness is a federal offense. Cease all contact or face prosecution. I was not harassing Richard. I was responding to his contact. But the government does not distinguish. The government protects its asset. I replied through my own attorney. I documented everything. I demonstrated that Richard had initiated contact. I demonstrated that I had never threatened him. I had only pursued legal remedies available to any citizen. I demonstrated that the government's protection was being used to shield a thief from civil liability. I received no response. But I had created a record. A record that could be subpoenaed. A record that could be leaked. A record that made the government's position uncomfortable. I also continued my local pressure. In Portland, a reporter found a man matching Richard's description living under the name Daniel Cruz. In Sacramento, another match, named Thomas Webb. In Denver, a third, named Adrian Vela. None were confirmed. All were possible. All created questions the Marshals Service had to answer. October. My mother's health failed. Stress. Grief. The loss of everything she had worked for. She was hospitalized. The bills were immediate. The insurance was inadequate. I used my own savings. I borrowed from my firm. I did not tell her about Richard's offer. About the $800,000 that could have helped her. I did not want her to know that her husband's godson had become her thief. That the government protected him. That I was fighting alone. I sat in her hospital room and watched her sleep. I thought about my father. About his letter. About his fear. He had known. He had tried to warn me. He had trusted the system enough to save documents, but not enough to save himself. I would not make his mistake. I would not trust the system. I would use it. I would pressure it. I would make the cost of protecting Richard higher than the benefit. My mother woke. She held my hand. She asked about the money. I told her I was handling it. She smiled. She trusted me. That trust was everything. That trust was what Richard had violated. That trust was what I would honor. November brought a hearing. Not in court. In the Marshals Service internal review. I was not invited. I was informed. Richard's status was being examined. His contact with me. His potential exposure in media. His continued value versus his growing liability. The trafficking case was concluding. The prosecution had secured convictions. Richard's testimony was complete. His protection was no longer essential. It was convenient. It was customary. But it was not required. I learned this from a source. A clerk in the review office. Someone who believed the system should serve victims, not just witnesses. I prepared. I hired new attorneys. I filed motions in every jurisdiction where Richard might be. I created legal presence. I created the possibility of immediate action if his protection was lifted. I also prepared personally. I trained in self-defense. Not for violence. For confidence. For the moment when I might stand in front of Richard and speak truth without fear. I would not hurt him. I would witness him. I would make him visible. That was my goal. Visibility. Accountability. The end of anonymity. December. The decision. Richard's protection was terminated. Not publicly. Not immediately. But terminated. He was given 30 days to establish independent identity. To leave the program. To become legally himself again. Or whoever he had become. The Marshals Service did not inform me. They had no obligation. I learned through my source. I prepared. I hired investigators in Portland, Sacramento, Denver. I focused on Portland. The match there was strongest. The timeline fit. The employment records suggested financial services, Richard's expertise. I flew to Portland on December 15th. I stayed in a hotel near the address I had identified. I watched. I waited. I became the ghost I had learned to be. 3 days before Christmas I saw him. Walking from a parking garage to an office building. Different hair. Different glasses. Different walk. But him. The hands were the same. The way he checked his phone. The way he looked over his shoulder. The way he was afraid. I followed him. Not close. Not obviously. I learned his routine. His apartment. His new job. His new name. Daniel Cruz. He had stolen my work. My preparation. My cover. I did not confront him immediately. I documented. I built evidence of his location, his identity, his employment. I hired a local attorney. I filed suit. Not for the money. For the recognition. For the legal declaration that Daniel Cruz was Richard Hale. That his debts were Richard's debts. That his crimes were Richard's crimes. I served the papers myself. I waited in the lobby of his apartment building. I watched him enter. I approached. "Richard," I said. He stopped. He looked at me. He recognized me. I saw the calculation. The evaluation. The fear. "My name is Daniel," he said. "No," I said. "Your name is Richard Hale. You stole $3.7 million from my family. You left my mother with nothing. You hid in a federal program that protected you while we suffered. That protection is ended. This is a lawsuit. You will respond. You will be deposed. You will testify. Or you will be held in contempt. Your choice." I handed him the papers. He took them. His hands shook. I walked away. I did not look back. I had become visible. I had made him visible. That was enough. For that moment. The lawsuit proceeded. Slowly. Richard, legally Daniel, fought every step. He claimed mistaken identity. He claimed harassment. He claimed that I was pursuing a vendetta, not justice. He had resources. The $3.7 million was still largely inaccessible, frozen in cryptocurrency wallets, but he had working income. He had legal representation. He had time. I had less. My firm supported me partially. Pro bono hours. Reduced rates. But not unlimited. My mother needed care. My brother needed support. My own life was on hold. I continued. I deposed Richard's colleagues in Portland. I established his employment history. I found inconsistencies, gaps that matched his time in Phoenix, references that traced to his old identity. I built a chain, circumstantial, but strong. Strong enough for a civil jury, strong enough for a judgment, strong enough to make him pay, even if I never collected $1. The trial was scheduled for March, 1 year after my father's death, 1 year after Richard disappeared, 1 year after I began my pursuit. February brought settlement negotiations. Richard, through his attorneys, offered $1.2 million. Anonymous transfer. No admission of guilt. No public disclosure. He would resign his Portland position. He would relocate. He would disappear again, this time without government protection. I would have no further contact. No further claim. I considered this. My mother urged acceptance. My brother urged acceptance. My attorneys urged acceptance. The money would help. The money would heal. The money would restore some of what was lost. But I thought about my father. About his letter. About his fear. He had not wanted money. He had wanted truth. He had wanted accountability. He had wanted the man who betrayed him to be known, to be visible, to be responsible. I refused the settlement. I told my attorneys to prepare for trial. I told my family to trust me. I told myself that justice was worth more than recovery, that visibility was worth more than anonymity, that my father's legacy demanded completion, not compromise. The trial lasted 5 days. I testified. Richard testified, denying everything, claiming mistaken identity, producing documents that were forged but difficult to disprove. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. They found for me. They found that Daniel Cruz was Richard Hale. They found that Richard Hale had committed fraud. They awarded $3.7 million in damages, plus interest, plus punitive dommages. Total, $5.2 million. The judgment was public. The record was clear. Richard Hale was exposed. His new identity was known. His location was known. His crimes were known. I had won. Legally. Morally. Completely. But I had not collected. The cryptocurrency remained inaccessible. Richard's visible assets were minimal. The judgment was, in practical terms, unenforceable. I had my truth. I had my victory. I did not have my money. I did not have my father's future. I did not have the years my mother had lost to fear and grief. I had won and I had lost. Both completely. Richard disappeared again. Not into witness protection. Into private hiding. He left Portland. He left Daniel Cruz behind. He became someone else. I do not know who. I do not know where. The judgment follows him. The debt follows him. The exposure follows him. He will always be Richard Hale to anyone who searches. To any employer who checks. To any relationship he forms. That is my victory. Not financial. Permanent. He stole visibility from my family. I restored it to him. He will never be anonymous again. I returned to Phoenix. I returned to my firm. I returned to real estate law, to contracts, to systems that work most of the time. I established a foundation in my father's name. The Diego Ortega Construction Scholarship. For children of undocumented workers. For people building futures without protection. For people like my father, who believed in trust and were betrayed by it. I fund it personally. From my income, not from the judgment. From work, not from recovery. I want to tell you what this experience taught me, because I did not spend 2 years pursuing a man through federal programs and civil courts just to have a story. I did it because my father believed in justice, and I needed to prove that belief was not foolish. Systems do not protect victims automatically. They protect processes. They protect themselves. They protect witnesses who are useful, even when those witnesses are also thieves. The people who suffer are expected to accept their suffering as contribution to greater good. I do not accept this. I will never accept this. Every victim has the right to pursue their own justice. Every victim has the right to make the cost of their victimization visible. Every victim has the right to refuse silence. I found my father's letter. I honored his fear. I completed his warning. I became the daughter he raised me to be. Not compliant. Not patient. Not trusting. Determined. Visible. Unfinished until finished. My mother lives with me now. She is recovering. Slowly. She will not return to her old self. Neither will I. We are different people. Wiser. Sadder. More careful with trust. My brother finished his MBA. He works for a nonprofit. He helps families who lost homes to fraud. He understands. We do not speak of Richard often. We do not need to. He is present in our caution, in our verification, in our refusal to accept performance as character. I date occasionally. Carefully. I ask questions I would not have asked before. I verify answers I would have accepted before. I am not paranoid. I am prepared. The man I eventually love will understand this, will accept this, will be verified and remain. I am optimistic. I am also patient. I have learned that the best things require waiting, require documentation, require the willingness to walk away if verification fails. I received a letter last month. No return address. Postmarked from Mexico. Inside a photograph. Richard. Older. Thinner. Standing in front of a small house. He looks tired. He looks visible. On the back handwritten. You won. I know. I am sorry. Not enough. Never enough. But true. I do not know if it is true. I do not know if he is sorry. I do not know if this is manipulation, performance, or genuine exhaustion. I do not need to know. I have my truth. I have my victory. I have my father's letter, framed now in my office. Do not trust him. Do not trust the system. I am afraid. He was right. He was also wrong. The system could be used, could be pressured, could be forced to serve justice instead of convenience. I used it. I pressured it. I forced it. That was my contribution, my inheritance, my completion of his warning. I am my father's daughter. I am visible. I am finished. I am also beginning. My name is Camila Ortega. I am 33 years old. I am a real estate attorney in Phoenix, Arizona. I specialize in contracts, in verification, in the prevention of fraud. I teach continuing education. I speak at conferences. I tell this story, with names changed, with details generalized, with the truth intact. I tell it because my father could not, because he was afraid, because he trusted and was betrayed, because he wrote a letter and hoped it would be enough. It was not enough. It was the beginning. I was the completion. I found the letter. I followed the money. I pressured the system. I exposed the thief. I won and I lost and I won again. The money is gone. The thief is visible. The system is warned. My father is honored. My mother is safe. My brother is working. I am here. I am visible. I am unafraid. If this story meant something to you, leave a 2 in the comments so I know you stayed with me through the whole thing. And if you know someone who needs to hear it, share it with them. Some messages find the people who need them.